UFC 302 just went down. Well, I'm a little bit late getting to this because I went out on Saturday night for my birthday and I got absolutely bladdered. And yeah, I was a little bit hungover yesterday. So I took a day off, which is rare. But today we're going to get into a bit of a breakdown of the event. I've taken notes and really I want to get to talking about the main event. Dustin Poirier versus Islam Makhachev. And then also a little bit about Strickland versus Paulo Costa. But first, a general recap of the fights on the card because we done good with the predictions this week, lads. I got 9 predictions out of 12 fights right, so pretty decent. Right now, the first 2 fights, Andre Lima versus whatever that guy's name is, and Aylin Perez versus Joseline Edwards. I didn't really watch them, to be honest. I was hungover. I kind of skipped through them. I didn't watch it, I'm not gonna lie. But I actually got the predictions right, so can't complain. Next, we got Mickey Gall versus Bassil Hafez. Controversial decision. I thought that Mickey Gall was looking pretty decent. I thought that we might have seen Mickey Gall on a little bit of a downward trend. Bassil Hafez fought Jack Della Maddalena a while back and he looked really good. However, I don't know what happened to that version of Bassil Hafez because he didn't look too great in this fight. He was throwing some proper wild punches. He was squaring right up in his stance when Mickey Gall was closing the distance. He gassed out proper fast and Mickey Gall looked decent. He had a good 1-2. He caught Bassil. It might even be Bassil. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he caught him a few times. I thought that Mickey Gall might have walked away with the decision, but Bassil won. Next, we had Jake Matthews versus Phil Rowe. Now, I wanted to pick Jake Matthews in this fight, and if you go back and watch my predictions video, you'll see that I was talking about Jake Matthews in one of his fights had really good swag and incredible versatility in his striking, extremely fast, and he looked fantastic. And then his last 2 fights, he didn't look too great in. So I thought Phil Rowe, he's super long and rangy for the welterweight division, dead tall, and he actually made Jake Matthews look like a lightweight in there. So I got this decision wrong. I thought that Phil Rowe might have been able to stay on the outside a little bit, use that long 1-2, which he did use a few times in the fight, but for some reason, he kept smothering his own punches and he was letting Jake Matthews get too close to him. I've got some notes here. Jake mixed it up more. He stayed busier. He got on the inside of Phil's straight punches and landed loads of hard hooks. So what Jake Matthews was doing is he was using his head movement to get on the inside of Phil Rowe's punches and then going hooks to the body, hooks to the head, and Phil had no answer to it. Now, he did hurt Jake with a jab. I think it was in the 2nd round. I'm not too sure, but Phil couldn't cope with Jake Matthews' overall output. And one thing I found interesting is Phil Rowe. He looked very intense. The commentator booth even said that at one point he was like this, like proper game, as if he was going to war. But then that face and that look completely changed and disappeared going into round 3. Phil Rowe looked defeated. Next, we had Grant Dawson versus Joe Solecki. Now, it was just a big grappling fest. I predicted Grant Dawson to win by decision, I think. That's what happened, but pretty boring fight, to be honest. The crowd were all booing. And then speaking of boring fighters, we had Jailton Almeida versus Alexandr Romanov. Jailton Almeida looking like something that was built in a factory, looking like Universal Soldier, the Brazilian Brown version, looking absolutely jacked, 6'4" or whatever he is, big Brazilian trembolone delts. And then Alexandr Romanov, 6'3", looking like an absolute fat pie. Jailton Almeida throws 2 kicks, then he gets the takedown very easily off Romanov's kick, so Romanov throws a kick back. Jailton catches it, he gets a round 1 submission, and this Romanov guy was actually meant to be a decent grappler, and he had no defense against the choke whatsoever. He just left his chin up in the air. Jailton latched up the choke dead easy and submitted him. Next, we had a fairly fun fight. It was Cesar Almeida versus Roman Kopylov. I'm going by my notes here because I had to take notes. I was struggling yesterday when I was watching this, but it was an interesting fight. They were both southpaw. Round 1, Almeida had some really nice kicks. He was spamming the calf kicks like nothing else. Now, Roman had a really fast 1-2. He landed it 3 or 4 times and almost rocked Almeida. So Roman's striking looked really fast. And then Almeida was having an issue with his right eye. And the moment that Joe Rogan says, oh look, Almeida's pouring on his right eye, Roman drops Almeida with a left hand to the right side of Almeida's face. Because obviously if this side is half blind, you're not going to be able to see the punches coming from this direction. So I thought that was a really good read by Roman. But then the fight got fairly close from there on out, especially in round 2 and round 3. Honestly, this is another one that kind of could have went either way. Almeida started having a lot more success because he was applying pressure and keeping Roman on the back foot, and then Almeida was figuring out Roman's timing. Almeida was landing nice strikes, but he was taken down again, and Roman was able to keep him on the ground for the full duration of that round. And apparently Roman broke his left hand in the fight, so I thought that was pretty good to be able to throw that 1-2 with a broken left hand. I think it was his left anyway, and still get the victory. So that was an okay fight. Next, we move into the main card. Donald Trump comes out, amazing atmosphere in the building, and it's mad to think that 4, 5, 6 years ago when Trump used to come to the UFC events, the people used to boo him, and I think now that they've got Joe Biden in the White House and they realise that the guy is full of dementia, touches and sniffs kids, how good he had it when Trump was in power, and now he always gets standing ovations and everyone loves him, which is good. I'm happy to see. So the main card, to be honest, this fight card was a bit of a stinker. The main card opener was Randy Brown versus Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos. And Randy Brown might be like the biggest waste of potential ever. Dead tall, big long arms, dead long legs. You can't touch him and he can jab your head off. And for some reason, he just lets everyone who he fights get too close to him. He cannot manage range properly. I thought it might have been Randy Brown by a first or second round KO. That didn't happen. It was a decision again. So round one, not too much happening. The crowd was chanting F Joe Biden, which is quite funny. And then the judges on this card were ridiculous, but then also the referee for this fight was atrocious. I think it was his first fight that he's ever reffed, and it seems like it might have been his last as well, because he didn't come out again for any other fights after this fight. Dos Santos got poked in the eye by Randy Brown. The referee took him off to the side, said, "Oh, you're okay, yeah, you got a poked eye." And Dos Santos was like, "Oh, yeah, my eye's being poked." And then the referee said, "Right, fight." And he didn't give Dos Santos the time to recover. You have to give the fighter a 5-minute allowance to recover from an eye poke. The referee doesn't just go, "Right, go on, back in the fight." Let the fighter recover. And then the referee ignored a second eye poke. He was all over the place. But yeah, my notes basically say it was a back and forth fight. Big right hand by Dos Santos in the second, which hurt Randy. Dos Santos was able to get Randy's back, and then Santos spends the next 2 minutes going for the rear naked choke, but then Randy reverses the position and takes Dos Santos's back and almost get the rear naked choke. So it was a good back and forth fight with Randy Brown coming on top with the decision win. So that's another one we got right. Then we had, this absolute snooze fest. Niko Price versus Alex Morono. Now, I'll be honest, this is another one that I kind of half tuned out to. I might have went on Instagram and scrolled through some reels, to be honest. But how the hell are these two main card fighters? I'm not a professional fighter. Yeah, I've done martial arts, and I'm not saying that I would do any better than these guys, but how are these two lads in the UFC with the technique that they had on display? It was so sloppy, and I've wrote down right here, bit of a sloppy first round. It wasn't a bit of a sloppy first round, Shaun. Open your eyes. It was an absolute slop fest. I didn't pay much attention to who won, but some of the strikes had awful technique, considering that the UFC fighters. Go back and watch that fight or watch the highlights again. There's literally moments where, especially that Alex Morono, but Niko Price included, are like this, punching elbows out and like throwing like the cat strike. What I call it, the Chinese cat strike. They're throwing punches like that. First thing first, you shouldn't really punch with your elbows out like this, because you see it coming. You're going to see this coming a lot faster than that. If I show that elbow first, I'm telegraphing that the fact that the punch is going to come. This Alex Morono was walking forward straight like this. I'm like, what the hell's going on? These are in the UFC. Looks like a retired, old, disabled man. I'm exaggerating slightly, but you can kind of tell that these are two fighters who are at the end of their careers, who were never really super technical fighters anyway. They're just both kind of dogs, if you like. You know, they got that dog in them, and they'll get in there, bite down on the mouthpiece, and throw 20% power punches and struggle to get the knockout. And I was even thinking when I was watching this should have been a prelim fight. None of them had the power to finish the fight or hurt each other, despite the fact that they were both landing constantly all the time. So, pretty stinky fight. Who even won that fight? Oh yeah, it was Niko Price. I predicted Alex Morono, so I got that one wrong, but I think the real loser of that fight are the fans. Next, we have Kevin Holland versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. I can't say his second name. Now, this was an interesting fight. I picked Michal to win, and straight out the gate, Michal comes over with a big, massive overhand left, catches Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland gets clearly knocked down, and I found out later on after the fight that he didn't score it as a knockdown on Kevin Holland. So I think Kevin Holland still has 0 knockdowns on his record, despite the fact that was a clear knockdown. So I don't know what was going on there with the scoring system. Anyway, more stupidity on this card. Michal knocks down Kevin Holland, starts raining down punches, and then he just sits there with his arm in Kevin Holland's guard and his head as well, whilst Kevin Holland is clearly setting up an arm triangle or an arm bar, and just leaves his arm there. Next thing, Holland grabs the arm, gets him into an armbar, and oh my days, this arm's going to snap, and this Michal isn't going to tap. What an absolute tough son of a bitch that Michal was. Kevin Holland was yanking on that arm, and then eventually broke it, and Michal still didn't tap. Now, this brings into question the debate around, should this fight have been stopped? I thought to myself that they weren't going to stop it because Michal didn't tap. Okay, his arm broke, but should the referee intervene if the arm is broken or not? Because Michal looked visibly gutted when the fight was stopped. Why was it stopped? He didn't tap. And I know this has happened before. Remember when Jamal Hill was fighting Paul Craig, and Paul Craig had him in an arm triangle and he dislocated his elbow and his arm was flapping around everywhere. However, I believe that fight was stopped because of the strikes that Paul Craig was landing on Jamal Hill. Paul Craig was landing elbows, then he was landing strikes. So the fight was stopped then because of the strikes, not because of the arm dislocation. There's been plenty of occasions where fighters have torn ACLs, dislocated the joints, broken bones, and they are still able to fight. Okay, so Michal broke his right arm, was it? But he's still got other weapons to continue the fight with. The lad didn't tap. So that's one thing I found myself thinking when I was watching this fight, like, should that fight have been stopped? What do you guys think? Let me know down below. Next, moving on, we got Shaun Strickland versus Paulo Costa. It was a bit of a boring fight, but we kind of know that going in. Shaun Strickland has never been a finisher. I know he knocked down Israel Adesanya, but then you got to remember, the other 95% of that fight was also boring. It's not really Shaun Strickland's fault because Shaun Strickland's style is always the same. It's kind of like Khabib in a way. You know exactly what it is he's going to do. So it's up to you as the opponent to exploit that. Right now, Shaun Strickland clearly won this fight, but I took notes right here as they were reading out the judges' scorecards. One judge scored it 49-46 for Paulo Costa, and then one judge scored it 50-45 to Shaun Strickland. How can you have two completely different takes of what happened in the fight? These are meant to be professional judges. Now, when I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, okay, Paulo Costa, he's doing bits, he's doing work, but he's always on the back foot. He's landing a lot of leg kicks. However, Shaun Strickland was landing a lot of teeps. So what scores more? A teep to the gut or a kick to the leg? Same thing, really. If you take 50 teeps to your gut, I guarantee it's going to affect you in the same way that a leg kick is. You feel winded, you can't breathe, it interrupts your rhythm, interrupts your combinations. Paulo Costa was landing more body shots, but Shaun Strickland was landing more jabs and 1-2s. So I just don't know how the judges scored it differently. The round by round notes that I've got here are: round one wasn't too eventful. Paulo Costa came out the gate with a lot of low kicks. You could have given that round to Costa for the low kicks and the body jabs and straights to the body, but Shaun landed a lot of front kicks. He got a takedown and a few jabs. So although I wasn't scoring the fight round by round, I just thought how you score this fight depends what you're looking for. Because what's more significant, a light jab to the body or a light jab to the head? I mean, they're kind of both the same, but you've got to go jab to the head is more meaningful if the power is similar. Then round two was more of the same. Shaun had the pressure, constantly walking Paulo Costa down. Paulo Costa landed some nice, hard, low kicks. Shaun almost drops Paulo Costa with a left jab. We also noticed that Paulo Costa's cardio started becoming a factor in slowing down the fight. Costa was breathing out his mouth a lot, although to be fair, his cardio still held up for the rest of the fight. Then going into round three, Shaun Strickland's coaches said you need to start turning it up a little bit. You're leaving these rounds too close. You need to start putting your combinations together a bit more. And Shaun listened because Shaun started coming out with small blitzes. And then Shaun checked a kick by Costa, which hurt Costa badly. Costa had a visible limp after that for a good couple minutes or so. But then Costa needs to sort out his coaches, because going into round four, the coaches told Costa that he was up. He was winning the fight. Costa wasn't winning the fight. At the very, very best, you could say it was maybe even or it was close. And that is from an extremely biased perspective. But Shaun Strickland was clearly winning this fight. And then in the fifth, it was more of the same. And one thing that done me head in, right, in the fifth round is that Shaun Strickland in the last 10 seconds started going crazy and trying to do a little bit of a Max Holloway. But it's like he didn't know what he wanted to throw. He done like a jumping Karate Kid kick with no intention to land. His punches were all over the place. His teeps were just terrible. It's like he let his adrenaline take over him, but then just let all the technique go out the window. Now, I've made a note here. I know a lot of people found this fight boring, but the problem with Strickland's fights is they're too close because his defense is like 9 out of 10 and his offense is like 5 out of 10. So he defends a lot of the shots that are coming his way. He continues to walk down his opponent, but then he barely throws anything. Okay, he throws the teeps, but they're not really damaging. As I say, they're more like a pattern interrupt type of attack. And then his jab sometimes isn't even a jab. It's more like a back fist. So this is what he does. Shaun Strickland's like this, and he goes like that almost. He doesn't throw the jab like this. He throws it almost like a back fist, which means there's no power in it. This is weird to say, but sometimes Shaun Strickland looks hesitant to throw. He's got fantastic defense, but he needs to work on his output, because we see him in sparring and he is non-stop. He's throwing loads of shots. He's got great hands, but when it's time to actually fight, he doesn't really do much. And to be fair, I'm a Shaun Strickland fan. I'm always going to tune in to watch him fight. But I don't understand why Costa didn't stand his ground, didn't plant his feet. I think the commentary might have even said it as well. Costa needs to stand his ground, bite down on his mouthpiece, and throw some hard shots at Strickland. If Paulo Costa and Shaun Strickland stand in the center of the cage, bite down on the mouthpiece, and throw down, who do you think's going to win? I mean, I'd actually take Paulo Costa in that bet. Paulo Costa's got some hard hooks. He caught Shaun Strickland with a solid left hook to the body. I can't remember in what round it was, but Costa's got power, and I just don't know why he was on his bike the entire fight. You're just letting Shaun Strickland do what he does best. If you want to beat Shaun Strickland, you have to put the pressure on him. So there you go. Shaun Strickland's won by a pretty boring decision. Got that one right as well. And then finally, we have Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. Now, very interesting fight. I said Islam would win by first round knockdown and then get a submission on Dustin Poirier. Now, I was so close to being right with that prediction, because in that first round, Islam rocks Dustin and then almost submits him in the first round. And then the majority of that first round took place on the ground with Islam in control. In round two, Dustin Poirier throws a leg kick. He proved me wrong, because I was saying before this fight, we never see Dustin Poirier throw any kicks. And he did. He threw a leg kick, so good stuff, Dustin. He almost gets taken down again, though. Dustin also has some great body shots in this round. Go back and watch this fight again, even if you watch the highlights. Islam Makhachev's striking was pretty on point in this fight, and he outstruck Dustin. He landed more significant strikes, but because the threat of the takedown is always there, that's what makes Islam's striking work. So then in round three, Islam catches Dustin with some hard knees. He also threw a decent uppercut that somewhat stunned Dustin, and some of these knees that Islam was catching Dustin with were ridiculous, proper hard. And in round three, Dustin had really good defense when he got his back taken, and when Islam was in mount, they were some dicey moments, but Dustin was able to reverse the mount position by pushing off against the cage, which was a really good moment. Dustin got back up, stuck his tongue out, walked Islam down, started throwing shots. But once again, even when you watch those moments and exchanges back, Islam catches Dustin a lot of the time in those exchanges. Then you go into round four. Islam's striking looked great in the first 2 minutes. Dustin had some really nasty body shots with Islam against the fence, so Islam had Dustin in the clinch. Dustin just put his head on Islam's chest and ripped to the body. Some really nice shots. And then going into round five, there was a lot of back and forth striking. We know that Dustin hurt his knee earlier on in the fight, so if you combine that with the fact that he's got hip issues, so he had a hip replacement, I think it was over 5 years ago, Islam gets the takedown on Dustin. He basically grabs Dustin's leg and then pulls him towards him. We see the likes of Muay Thai champion from England, Liam Harrison, in the One Championship do moves like these. They catch the teep and then pull it down and swoop it round. It's a fantastic technique, and it was good seeing Islam make the adjustments, because Islam was kind of struggling to get the takedowns in this fight. And I'll just say now, he didn't look as unbeatable as Khabib did, or as much as we were led to believe in the past. But my point I was getting to with the hip replacement and Dustin Poirier's knee injury earlier on in the fight is when Islam got that takedown, it kind of looked like Dustin Poirier was slow getting up, or he didn't respond, he didn't scramble. He got taken down and then he just went onto all fours and kind of accepted it. It was only a small moment, but I remember thinking to myself, why did Dustin not try and scramble a bit more after that takedown? And to be fair, Islam latched up the Darce choke fairly fast, but there was just that small moment where Dustin looked like he was accepting the takedown. And I believe that could have been because of whatever the knee injury was, and maybe his hip. Dustin Poirier's got good takedown defense, but then there are times where he does just accept getting taken down. And I believe that's because he believes in his jiu-jitsu, his grappling, his submissions. But I also believe because of the injuries. So I believe these injuries negatively affected Dustin's takedown defense. And then Islam latched up the Darce choke. Dustin Poirier tapped, and actually in in the post-fight interview, Dustin Poirier said that he went out, he went to sleep as he tapped. But yeah, very interesting back and forth fight. As I say, Islam doesn't look super invincible anymore. Dustin Poirier cut open Islam with an amazing elbow. Dustin Poirier leaned in, I think it was his right elbow. He leaned in and bang, cut up Islam when he was against the fence. Dustin had some fantastic body shots. I thought Dustin would have been able to have timed the uppercut. When I was watching it, Islam kept ducking down to his left. So Islam's in southpaw, Dustin Poirier's in southpaw. As Dustin was throwing the jab, Islam was ducking down here. And I remember shouting at the screen, throw the uppercut, Dustin, because if Dustin throw that jab, let Islam duck down and then boom, time that uppercut, he would have got it. And I believe Dustin Poirier in this fight laid down the template to beating Islam. Basically, put some pressure on Islam, but keep decent striking range with your hips back so you can anticipate the takedowns, and also keep away from the cage, because it's shown that his takedowns are only really super effective when you're up against the cage. Now, I know the final takedown that he got on Dustin Poirier and submitted him with was out in the open, but when you look at the majority of his takedown attempts, especially the ones out in the open, they're unsuccessful. And I believe there's people in the lightweight division who might be able to exploit that. You got to remember as well, Dustin Poirier was coming into this fight talking about retirement. We spoke about this in our predictions video. He's had hip injuries. He knew this was his last attempt at the title. Stylistically, this is a nightmare matchup for him. Everyone was doubting him, and he was still able to give Islam a 5-round war, stuff loads of takedowns, cut open Islam. And I believe a lot of the lightweight division, and maybe even now the welterweight division, are going to look at this and go, okay, yeah, I see the holes. I see what I can exploit here. Pardon, I see the holes. Pardon. Let's load up the two divisions now. Okay, so we got the lightweight division here and welterweight division. So Islam Makhachev, I believe there's some fighters here in this top 10 who might give Islam a run for his money. Arman's had a Jukian. Arman's got fantastic grappling. He's got decent striking as well. Remember that axe kick against Charles Oliveira? Absolutely ridiculous. But Arman is a fantastic grappler. Much better than Dustin Poirier. And when he fought Islam Makhachev in the first fight, he actually put up a good fight against Islam. Then you got Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira doesn't really have great grappling. Well, he's got great submissions, but in terms of wrestling or takedown defense, Charles Oliveira doesn't possess any takedown defense. Charles Oliveira will lie down for you and say, here you go, there's your takedown. Right now, come to me. Let me try and get a submission on you. That's how Charles Oliveira operates. Amazing off his back, but when you've got such a strong wrestler like Islam Makhachev on top of you, you got no chance. Now, Justin Gaethje, okay? So Justin Gaethje just beat Dustin Poirier not long ago and has got pretty decent wrestling. Okay, he didn't really use it that well against Khabib, but you could argue that Justin Gaethje is a better fighter these days. Better distance management, still a decent wrestler, big and strong like Dustin Poirier. So I believe he could potentially give Islam a better fight than they give Khabib. You got Gamrot, you got Chandler, Beneil Dariush, not really, Nofaziev, Max Holloway, that'll be interesting. Max Holloway versus Islam. So although Islam is talking about wanting to move up to welterweight, I would much rather see him fight Arman Tadjoukian or even Justin Gaethje. I don't mind that fight. Okay, he's coming off a loss against Max Holloway, but seeing him go straight over to the welterweight division, I believe a lot of the welterweights beat him. Leon Edwards, I reckon, would beat Islam Makhachev, just too big for him. Belal Muhammad could probably beat Islam Makhachev. Belal Muhammad is big compared to Islam, and Islam's fairly big. Shavkat would absolutely smoke Islam. Colby Covington, that's interesting. I don't know about that one. But the welterweight division, man, it's a big jump up. You're going from 155 pounds to 170. It's a 15-pound weight difference. That size is pretty significant. And it's the same when you look at the welterweight versus the middleweights. There's a big difference in that thickness, in that bone density, in that head size, in the neck circumference. I don't think moving up would be a good idea for Islam Makhachev. Who am I to say? I could be wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times in the past, but on that note, I'm happy to say that I got 9 predictions right on this fight card. So can we get a like on the video for this? I feel absolutely shattered. I need to go and eat and have a really good sleep tonight. Comment down below all your thoughts about this fight card, your main takeaways. Subscribe for daily fighting, boxing, MMA uploads, and I'll see you tomorrow.